Shalom, and welcome to Mashiach, Messiah from a true Jewish perspective. In this series, we are learning about the Mashiach, the Messiah, from purely Jewish sources. The Tanakh, the Talmuds, the Midrashim, the Zohar, the Targums, obviously, the writings of Philo of Alexandria, and the Dead Sea Scrolls, for example, purely Jewish sources. And so today's topic is two messiahs or one. How many messiahs would there be? The messianic prophecies that we see in the Tanakh generally fall into two categories. And we'll learn more about these as we continue our studies. But they tend to fall into two categories. One group of these prophecies tends to talk about a Messiah that comes and reigns for David's throne forever. A kingly Messiah, a Davidic Messiah. Other prophecies seem to talk about a Messiah who comes and suffers and dies. This is called Messiah ben Yosef or Messiah ben Ephraim, the Ephraimite Messiah. Or the Ephraim Messiah, not the Ephraimite Messiah, but the Ephraim Messiah, Messiah ben Ephraim, the Messiah of Ephraim. And he's called ben Ephraim because he's ben Yosef, because Joseph of old, the patriarch Joseph, suffered in order to redeem his brothers. And this is the case with the Messiah ben Yosef. So there's two basic versions of the two Messiah theory. There's the rabbinic two Messiah theory, which holds that there's Messiah ben Yosef, sometimes called Ephraim, because Ephraim was the son of Joseph. Like I said, he comes and suffers and he dies to redeem his brothers. And then there's Messiah ben David, or the kingly Messiah, and he comes and reigns for David's throne forever. Similarly, the Qumran two Messiah theory that we read about the Dead Sea Scrolls, there's a priestly Aaronic Messiah and a kingly Messiah. Now these do not really contradict because the priestly Messiah it very closely parallels Messiah ben Ephraim, okay, because of the priestly work of atonement. Excuse me. There's a very good example of the Messiah ben Ephraim to be found in Midrash Pesachita Rabbah 36. It reads as follows. It is actually a dialogue between Elohim and the Messiah. Elohim is speaking to the Messiah. And Elohim says, "Their sins will be upon you like a yoke of iron. They will choke your spirit because of their sins. Your tongue will cleave to the roof of your mouth. Do you accept this? If not, I will remove the decree from you." The Messiah replies, "Master of the worlds, how long will this last?" Elohim replies, "Ephraim, my true Messiah, ever since the 6 days of creation, you have taken this ordeal upon yourself. At this moment, your pain is my pain." Messiah replies, "Master of the worlds, I accept this with gladness in my soul, and my joy in my heart, so that not a single one of the house of Israel should perish. Not only for those alive, but also the dead. It is enough that the servant be like the master." Rabbi Dosa, around 250 CE, was a chief advocate of the two Messiah theory. He says in the Babylonian Talmud in Sukkot 52a, "What is the cause of the mourning?" It's talking about Zechariah, the mourning that's talked about in Zechariah 12:12. "It is well according to him who explains that the cause is the slaying of Messiah, the son of Joseph. since all that well agrees with the scriptural verse, and they shall look upon me whom they have pierced, and they shall mourn for him as one mourns for his only son. So Rabbi Dosa sees the piercing of the figure in Zechariah 12:10. They shall look upon me whom they have pierced, and they shall mourn for him as they have mourned for an only son, as a messianic prophecy referring to Messiah ben Yosef. And he's not alone, by the way. The Targum to Zechariah 12:10 also applies that passage to Messiah ben Yosef. There's an interesting prophecy about Messiah ben Yosef in an apocryphal book called The Wisdom of Solomon. And I want to emphasize that this is a Jewish book, although skeptics date it to around the 1st or 2nd century BCE still. According to Melitio, in the 2nd century CE, the Wisdom of Solomon back then was considered canonical by both Jews and Christians. The Hebrew version of the Wisdom of Solomon is also mentioned by Ramban in the preface to his commentary on the Torah. He also quotes from the book. Not only was it originally written in Hebrew, but the original Hebrew of the book survived at least until 1611, because there's a marginal note. The original 1611 King James Version Bible included the Wisdom of Solomon in an appendix in the Apocrypha. And in the margin, there is a reference referring to an alternate reading in the actual Hebrew text of the book. In Wisdom of Solomon 1611, there's a reference that says where the King James Version translates pricked, it says Hebrew stung, indicating that the King James translators actually had the original Hebrew, the Wisdom of Solomon, at their disposal. And I want to look at Wisdom of Solomon, chapter 2, starting in verse 12. Let us lie in wait for the righteous man, the Zadik, for he is inconvenient to us and opposes our actions. He reproaches us for sins against the Torah. He accuses us of sins against our training. He professes to have knowledge of Elohim and calls himself a son of the Lord. He became to us a reproof of our thoughts. The very sight of him is a burden to us, because his manner of life is unlike that of ours, and his ways are strange. We are considered by him as something base, and he avoids our ways as unclean. He calls the last end of the righteous happy, and boasts that Elohim is his father. Let us see if his words are true. Let us test what will happen at the end of his life. This actually recalls an account in the Torah concerning the life of Joseph. When his brothers cast Joseph into the pit, we read, "Come now, therefore, and let us slay him, and cast him into one of the pits. And we will say, an evil beast has devoured him, and we shall see what will become of his dreams." So there's this parallel between the patriarch Joseph and this future Messiah ben Yosef, Ephraim Messiah, who suffers and dies to redeem his brothers. The Qumran community, the Dead Sea, who wrote the Dead Sea Scrolls, they also believed in two messiahs. Quoting from the Manual of Discipline, column 9, lines 10 through 11, speaking of the messiahs, it says, "They shall govern themselves using the original precepts by which the men of the Yachad, the community, began to be instructed, doing so until there come the prophet and the messiahs of Aaron and Israel." Notice messiahs is plural. Two messiahs are also evident in some other documents, 1 QSA and 1Q 28a, where the two Messiahs are pictured at a messianic banquet table in the last days. So, back to our original question. Would there be one Messiah, or would there be two? Is this Ephraim Messiah the same Messiah as Messiah ben David, or is he a totally different Messiah? And to answer that question, we're going to turn to Midrash Rabbah Bamidbar 11:2. But let's actually go back to the Dead Sea Scrolls. In the Dead Sea Scrolls, while some passages refer to messiahs of Levi and Israel, the Damascus document refers 3 times to a figure called Messiah of Levi and Israel. So there's some confusion in the Dead Sea Scrolls. Is it messiahs or Messiah? Is there one or is there two? The Dead Sea Scrolls aren't sure. Okay, now let us turn to Midrash Rabbah, the Midrash Rabbah to Bamidbar 11:2, or Numbers 11:2. It says, another expression of the text, my beloved is like a gazelle. Israel explained, Rabbi Isaac said to the Holy One, blessed be he, sovereign of the universe, you have told us that you will come to us first. My beloved is like a gazelle. As the gazelle appears and then disappears, the first Redeemer appeared and then disappeared. Rabbi Berechiah, in the name of Rabbi Levi, said, like the first Redeemer, so will be the final Redeemer. The first Redeemer was Moses, who appeared to them and then disappeared. For how long did he disappear from their sight? Rabbi Tanahuma said 3 months, according it is written, they met Moses and Aharon, etc. The final Redeemer will also appear to them and then disappear. Now, remember, last week our study was that the Messiah was the prophet like Moses that we read about in Devarim, in the Torah, in Devarim chapter 18, verses 18 and 19. The prophet like Moses. And we talked about what that meant some. We're going to talk some more about what it means now, because it's also directly relevant to whether there's two Messiahs or one, and this role of the Messiah as a Redeemer. Here in the Midrash Rabbah, we are told that one of the ways that the Messiah is like Moshe is, and they're referred to as the first Redeemer, Moshe, and the second Redeemer, the Messiah. So there's a parallel between Moses redeeming Israel and Messiah redeeming Israel, and we're going to talk about that too as we continue forward, which is part of how the Messiah is like Moses, or like Moshe, okay? That's part of it. But part of it is that Moshe was revealed to the people, and then he was hidden away, and then he was revealed again, and the Messiah, we're told, is going to be like that. He's going to be like that. He's going to be a Redeemer like Moses, and he's going to be like that. Well, what does that mean? Moshe he was revealed when he gave the Torah to the people. Well, actually, he was revealed when he first came to the people. The people saw him, they received him, he was their leader. Then he went up on Mount Sinai. He redeemed them. He took them across the Red Sea, and we're going to see how that parallels the redemptive role of the Messiah. He took them across the Red Sea and redeemed them. And then he disappeared. He went up onto Mount Sinai, and he was gone for 40 days. And then he comes back from Mount Sinai, and he's revealed to them again. But while he was gone at Mount Sinai, they didn't know how he was receiving the Torah. And the people didn't know how long he would be gone. They didn't know how long he would be gone. They got to where he'd been gone so long, they said, he's never coming back. And then when the Messiah returns, of course, there's judgment. He did come back, and he returns in a role of judgment and severity. So there's also, too, he leaves in a role of chesed, and he comes loving kindness and mercy. in guiding, redeeming them, bringing them across the Red Sea, and then he returns in a role of severity, Geverah, to judge the people for having fallen away while he was gone. Okay, so there's not two different messiahs. There's one Messiah who is revealed as Messiah ben Yosef. He is hidden away like something like ascending to Mount Sinai. And then when he returns as Messiah ben David to execute judgment and upon the nations and rule the world. Okay. I want to talk about Moses as a redeemer and how it is that Messiah, Mashiach, is like Moshe as a second redeemer like Moses, because that's a major theme we talked about last week. The Messiah is like Moses. The Torah tells us that when that Messiah like Moses comes, we must accept him. We must give heed to him. And we learned that last week. And so it's important to know, how is he like Moses? Because that's really the easy way, the best way to find out, or a obvious way to find out who this prophet like Moses is, if we know how it is that he's like Moses. Okay, now we read in our Torah, in Shemot, Exodus 14, verses 13 through 14, and Moshe said to the people, "Fear not, stand still and see the salvation of Yahweh, which he will work for you today. For whereas you have seen the Egyptians today, you will see them again no more forever. Yahweh will fight for you, and you shall hold your peace." So we have here a picture of the salvation of Yahweh. Now, let us continue and skip down to verses 19 through 29. The angel of Elohim went before the camp of Yisrael, removed and went behind them, and the pillar of cloud removed from before them and stood behind them. And it came between the camp of Egypt and the camp of Israel, and there was the cloud and the darkness there, yet it gave light by night there, and the one came not near the other all the night. And Moshe stretched out his hand over the sea, and Yahweh caused the sea to go back by a strong east wind all the night, and made the sea dry land, and the waters were divided. And the children of Israel went into the midst of the sea upon the dry earth, and the waters were a wall unto them on their right hand and on their left. And the Egyptians pursued and went after them into the midst of the sea, all Pharaoh's horses, his chariots, and his horsemen. And it came to pass in the morning watch that Yahweh looked forth upon the host of the Egyptians through the pillar of fire of cloud, and discomfited the host of the Egyptians. And he took off their chariot wheels and made them to drive heavily, so that the Egyptians said, "Let us flee from the face of Israel, for Yahweh fights for them against the Egyptians." And Yahweh said unto Moshe, "Stretch out your hand over the sea, that the waters may come back upon the Egyptians, upon their chariots, and upon their horsemen." And Moshe stretched forth his hand over the sea, and the sea returned to its strength. When the morning appeared, and the Egyptians fled against it, and Yahweh overthrew the Egyptians in the midst of the sea. And the waters returned and covered the chariots and the horsemen, even all the host of Pharaoh went in after them into the sea, that remained not so much as one of them. But the children of Israel walked upon dry land in the midst of the sea, and the waters were a wall unto them on their right hand and their left. The salvation of Yahweh is pictured by this salvation of Israel being brought safely through the Red Sea while the Egyptians were destroyed. Now, I want to look at the commentary on this passage by Philo of Alexandria. Philo was a Jew that lived in Alexandria in the 1st century. And this is what he says in his book, his Dreams book, 265 through 266. Again, when you see amidst the wars and disasters of life the merciful hand of Elohim and his favorable power held over you and in standing in defense of you, be silent yourself, for that champion stands in no need of any assistance. And there are proofs of this fact according to the sacred writings, such, for instance, as the verse, Yahweh will fight for us and we shall be silent. Exodus 14:14. Remember, we were just looking at Exodus 14. And if you shall see the genuine offspring and firstborn of Egypt destroyed, namely desire and pleasures and pain and fear and iniquity and mirth and intemperance and other qualities which are similar and akin to these, then marvel and be silent, dreading the terrible power of Elohim. So Philo sees an allegory whereby the Egyptians represent desire, pleasures, pain, fear, iniquity, mirth, intemperance, and other qualities that are akin to these. In other words, Philo sees the Egyptians as representing what we call the Yetzer Ra, the inclination to do evil. And the sin nature, if you will. The Redeemer, Moshe, delivered us from the Egyptians, from the evil inclination. The second Redeemer will also, well, let's put it this way. The first Redeemer, Moses, delivered us from the Egyptians. The second Redeemer, like Moses was just an allegory. The second Redeemer, like Moses, will also redeem us, not from the Egyptians, but from the Yetzer Ra, which the Egyptians actually represented. And this is spoken of by Ramban, Rabbi Moshe ben Nachman, and his commentary to Deuteronomy 29, verse 6. And Yahweh your Elohim will circumcise your heart. It is this which the rabbis have said, if someone comes to purify himself, they assist him from on high. And the verse assures you that you will return to him after your heart, and he will help you. This following subject is very apparent from Scripture. Since the time of creation, man has had the power to do as he pleased, free will, to be righteous or wicked, to be a Rasha or to be a Tzaddik. This grant of free will applies likewise to the entire Torah period, so that people can gain merit upon choosing the good and punishment for preferring evil. But in the days of the Messiah, the choice of their genuine good will be natural. The heart will not despise the improper, and it will have no craving whatever for it. This is the circumcision mentioned here of the heart. For the lust and desire are the foreskin of the heart, and the circumcision of the heart means it will not covet or desire evil. We're talking about purging the evil inclination, Yetzer Ra, and that the Messiah plays a key role in purging the evil inclination. Let us continue in his commentary. Man will return at that time to what he was before the sin of Adam. So Ramban says man was in a certain state before the sin of Adam, but after the sin of Adam, man had an evil inclination, which by his nature he did what should properly be done. Man had just a Yetzer Tov before that, the inclination to do good, but he didn't have the inclination to do evil. And there was no conflicting desires in his will. as I have explained in Seder Bereshit. So in the days before Adam, man had, in the days of before Adam's fall, Adam had originally a Yitzer Tov, but no Yitzer Ra. Just an inclination to do good, a natural inclination to do good. He didn't want to do anything evil. It didn't even occur to him to do anything evil. He had no inclination to do anything evil. It is that which Scripture states in the book of Jeremiah 31:30, "Behold, the days come, says Yahweh, that I will make a new covenant with the house of Israel and the house of Judah, not according to the covenant that I made with their fathers, but this is the covenant that I will make with the house of Israel after those days, says the Eternal. I will put my Torah in their inward parts, and in their heart will I write it." This is the Torah internalized. This is a reference to the annulment of the evil instinct, of the evil inclination, and to the natural performance by the heart of its proper function. The Tanya of Rebbe Zalman is all about this. Therefore, Jeremiah said, "Further, and I will be their Elohim, and they shall be my people, and they shall teach no more every man his neighbor, and every man his brother, saying, Know Yahweh, for they shall all know me, from the least of them to the greatest of them." In other words, you won't have to teach people to know Yahweh because they're not going to have an evil inclination. They won't have a Yitzer Ra. They're only going to have a Yitzer Tov. They only have the inclination to do good. They're not going to have an inclination to do evil. So you don't have to tell them. You don't have to teach them good because it's their natural inclination. Now it is known that the imagination of man's heart is evil from his youth, and it is necessary to instruct him. At that time it will not be necessary to instruct them to avoid evil, for their evil instinct, their Yitzer Ra, will then be completely abolished. And so it is described by Ezekiel, "A new heart will I give you, and a new spirit will I put within you, and I will cause you to walk in my statutes." Ezekiel 36:26, by the way. This is telling us that the work of the Messiah is the redemption of the Messiah, is the destruction of the Yitzer Ra, like the Egyptians were destroyed in crossing the Red Sea. That death is like crossing the Red Sea. Well, that's another story. The evil, that there is like, the Egyptians were destroyed by the Red Sea. The Egyptians were destroyed through Moshe's work. The Messiah's work will be to destroy the Yitzer Ra. Continuing Ramban's commentary on Deuteronomy 29:6. "The new heart alludes to man's nature, and the new spirit to the desire and will in which our rabbis have said. And the years draw nigh when you shall say, I have no pleasure in them. These are the days of Messiah, as they offer opportunity neither for merit nor for guilt. For in the days of Messiah there will be no evil desire, no Yitzer Ra in man, but he will naturally perform the proper deeds. And therefore there will be neither merit nor guilt in them, for merit and guilt are dependent upon desire." Wow, this is really telling us what the purpose of Messiah is as a redeemer. That just as Moses redeemed us from the Egyptians, Messiah redeems us from the Yitzer Ra. And the Messiah is the prophet like Moses, because he is the second redeemer. Moses is the first redeemer, but whereas Moses redeemed us from the Egyptians, Messiah will redeem us from the Yitzer Ra. There's another important parallel between Messiah and Moses. Excuse me. We read in the Talmud, what is Messiah's name? This is in Sanhedrin 98b. What is the Messiah's name? Rabbi Sheila offers this answer. His name is Shiloh, for it is written, until Shiloh comes. Now, this Gemara in the Babylonian Talmud is citing Genesis 49:10. Genesis 49:10 says, "The scepter shall not depart from Judah, nor the staff from between his feet, until Shiloh comes, and unto him shall be the gathering of the people be." The Targum Onkelos, and Targum Jonathan, and Targum Yerushalayim, you all have until Messiah comes, instead of until Shiloh comes in this verse. So all the Targums identify Shiloh here as the Messiah. The word Shiloh has a gematria, that's a numerical value. In Hebrew, letters and numbers are the same thing. So if you add all the letters together, each word is actually a mathematical expression. You get a value of 345 for Shiloh, which is, by the way, the value for Hashem and El Shaddai. And Shiloh comes has a gematria of 358. And that's the gematria for both Messiah and Moses. The Zohar tells us about this verse, Genesis 49:10. Reading from volume 1, page 25 of the Zohar, "The scepter," referring to the Messiah of the house of Judah, "and the staff to the Messiah of the house of Joseph, until Shiloh comes. This is Moses." The gematria of Shiloh and Moses being the same. And here we have confirmation that we were on the right track. Whether there's two Messiahs or one, there's two, but they're one, because we have the scepter and the staff, which are held as one in the hand. And Zohar, volume 1, page 237, the word Shiloh here is spelt with both a yud and a hey to allude to the holy supernal name of Yah, by which the Shekinah shall rise. So the Zohar is telling us that Genesis 49:10, we have two Messiahs, or two revealings of Messiah, represented as a scepter and as a staff, which are one, Shiloh. Shiloh has Yah, that the one Shiloh has Yah within him. Okay. The two comings of Messiah are also evident in the Tanakh itself. So let's look at that. In Zechariah chapter 13, verses 4 through 6, we see the Messiah coming in his role as judge. It's described as having wounds in the midst of his hands, and this clearly refers us back to Zechariah 12:10. In Zechariah 12:10, we read about that the Messiah has been pierced. And we read earlier that Rabbi Dosa tells us that this is in fact speaking of Messiah ben Yosef. When we compare Zechariah 13, verses 1 through 3, with Micah chapter 5, verses 8 through 14, they are so clearly parallel. They're clearly talking about the same thing. They're speaking of the same messianic judge. And so then if we look to Micah chapter 5, verses 1 and 2, we find that the Messiah was born in Bethlehem, which then points us to two comings of Messiah. The first to be born in Bethlehem, pierced in the midst of his hands, among his own people, and then after that to be the messianic judge. Another evidence of the two comings of Messiah can be found in Psalm 110, verses 1 through 7. A Psalm of David. Yahweh says unto my Adon, sit you at my right hand until I make your enemies your footstool. The rod of your strength, Yahweh, will send out of Zion, rule you in the midst of your enemies. Your people offer themselves willingly in the day of your warfare, in adornments of self-partness. From the womb of the dawn, yours is the dew of your youth. Yahweh has sworn and will not repent. You are a Kohen forever after the manner of Melchizedek. Yahweh at your right hand does crush kings in the days of his wrath. He will judge among the nations. He fills it with dead bodies. He crushes the head over a wide land. He will drink of the brook in the way, whereof he will lift up the head. According to the Midrash Tehillim, the Midrash of the Psalms, the second Lord in the first verse here, the second so-called Lord, is the Messiah. So when it says, Yahweh says unto my Adon, it's speaking, Yahweh says to my Messiah, to the Messiah. So it says, the Lord said to my Lord, sit you at my right hand. This is quoting the Midrash. To the Messiah it will also be said, and in mercy the throne be established. So the two comings of Messiah, the two revealings of Messiah are evident. The Messiah ascends to Yahweh, apparently from earth, where he's made some enemies while he was on earth. He has enemies. So he ascends. Where has he been? Earth. He ascends to Yahweh, and he sits there, stays there until his return, at which he will crush kings and his enemies will be made his footstool. We could clearly see the Messiah, like Moshe, ascends to be with Yahweh, just as Moshe was with Yahweh on Mount Sinai, and then returns to crush his enemies. Just like Moshe. The truth is, the Messiah comes twice. The two Messiahs are one, two comings of the Messiah. In his first coming, he will fill the redemptive role of Messiah ben Yosef. He will suffer and die in order to redeem his brothers, to ultimately free us in the end from the Yetzer Hara. Then he ascends to Yahweh, to the right hand of Yahweh. And in time he would come again and bring peace to the world and reign from King David's throne and judge the world in the role of Messiah ben David. There's one Messiah who comes twice. And this is the teaching of our Messiah from purely Jewish sources. Nothing but Jewish sources. I hope you've benefited from this study today in the nature of Mashiach and how our Messiah is like Moshe, the second Redeemer, that like Moshe redeemed us from the Egyptians, he redeems us ultimately from the Yetzer Hara. And how he redeems us from the Yetzer Hara, how he suffers, how he dies, he is pierced through, and how he ascends to the right hand, and he returns to reign from David's throne. Thus, like Moshe also, he is revealed, like Moshe ascends to Mount Sinai, and then returns to bring judgment. Okay, that's the end of this lesson, and I hope you will join us again for our next lesson in Mashiach, Messiah from a true Jewish perspective. Shalom.